The night after the grand unveiling of the Forrester collection was supposed to be a triumph, a celebration of artistry, lineage, and legacy. The runway lights had barely dimmed, the champagne flutes still held traces of victory, and the air of Forrester creations shimmered with success. Electra Forrester had become the star of the evening. Her designs bold, her poise magnetic, her confidence blinding. Yet, as dawn approached, that brilliance gave way to horror. When the security guard unlocked the atelier the next morning, the smell of iron hung faintly in the air. There, amidst a pool of crimson, Electra was found lying motionless beside the cutting table, her hand still clutching a piece of unfinished silk, her throat marked by a single, precise slash that could have been mistaken for the work of a tailor's shears. The silence that followed was unbearable. Forrester Creations had seen scandal before, infidelity, betrayal, corporate takeovers, but nothing like this. The atelier, once the sacred space where generations had built their craft, had become a crime scene. Ridge's voice trembled as he ordered the doors locked, security tapes retrieved, and staff questioned. Everyone moved like ghosts, whispering Electra's name as if saying it aloud might summon her spirit. But beneath the shock was fear, because everyone knew that in the world of fashion, beauty and ambition often shared the same sharp edge as the weapon that had taken her life. The first suspect emerged almost instantly. Zend, the brilliant but volatile designer, had clashed with Electra hours before the show. Their argument had spilled out from the fitting room into the hallway, witnessed by several staff members. It was about design credit, the cut of a gown, the ownership of a silhouette. Electra had accused him of stealing her signature form, while Zend fired back that she was using his prototype, without acknowledgement. The confrontation had ended with Electra walking away, smirking, while Zend stood frozen, fists clenched. When the police questioned him, his alibi was weak. He had left the after-party early, claiming exhaustion, but no one had seen him again until the following morning. Worse yet, his fingerprints were on several scissors in the room. Still, something about the scene felt too deliberate, too neat. The cut on Electra's throat was clean, professional, deliberate. The scissors used were missing. And then came the first anomaly, 12 minutes of hallway footage gone. Not corrupted. Deleted. When the head of security replayed the surveillance feed, the clock jumped from 1:42 a.m. to 1:54, a gap no one could explain. Whoever had done this wasn't just impulsive, they were careful, calculating. And in Forrester Creations, that kind of precision meant one thing: the killer understood the craft. The investigation intensified when Paris was called in. Nervous but determined, she confessed that she had seen someone leaving the design room around that time. A person wearing a dark jacket and, most notably, white gloves. That detail sent a ripple through the room. White gloves were not part of the staff uniform. They were, however, a signature quirk of R.J. Forrester. He wore them when handling delicate fabrics, claiming his touch could alter the weave if his skin made contact. It was an eccentric habit, but now it looked like damning evidence. When questioned, R.J. seemed calm, perhaps too calm. He admitted he had gone to the atelier that night, but insisted it was only to retrieve sketches he had forgotten. He denied seeing Electra, denied any involvement, and looked his father straight in the eye as he swore his innocence. But Ridge's faith in his son faltered when the police found traces of Electra's perfume on the gloves in R.J.'s locker. The press erupted. Headlines screamed betrayal within the Forrester dynasty, speculating that jealousy or forbidden attraction might have driven R.J. to kill. The Forrester family, long accustomed to living under scrutiny, now faced the weight of a public scandal intertwined with tragedy. Brooke tried to protect her son, insisting that there had to be another explanation. But even she couldn't ignore the cracks forming in his story. It was Carter who first noticed what everyone else missed. The scissors, or rather, the shears, used in the attack weren't ordinary. They were a rare, limited edition model handcrafted in Milan, produced only for a handful of elite designers. There were only 5 pairs in existence, and one of them had belonged to him. He had given it to Electra months earlier as a gesture of admiration, perhaps affection, though he would never admit it publicly. When detectives told him the weapon was identical to that pair, Carter froze. He insisted the shears had been in Electra's private drawer in the atelier, locked away. But when police searched, they were gone. In their place was a counterfeit, similar weight, same brand, but not the same engraving. His initials, once etched on the inner blade, were missing. Someone had switched them. This revelation turned the case upside down. If the weapon had been replaced, then someone had planned this long before that night. The murder wasn't driven by impulse. It was a performance, staged with costume, props, and choreography. Each clue pointed toward a different suspect, as though the killer wanted to pit the Forresters against one another. Zen's motive was professional rivalry. RJ's was jealousy. Carter's was intimacy turned sour. Paris's testimony placed him at the scene, but the deletion of the footage hinted at an insider with technical access. And then there was Electra herself. Her sudden rise had earned her enemies. The question was, which of them wanted her gone badly enough to turn a design tool into a weapon? As investigators dug deeper, they uncovered a web of overlapping ambitions. Electra had recently secured exclusive rights to a patent for a new textile technique, something that could revolutionize Forrester's brand identity. Zen had demanded co-ownership, claiming the idea stemmed from his concept sketches. RJ had quietly offered to help her protect it from corporate theft, though some whispered his interest wasn't purely professional. Carter, ever the loyal counsel, had handled the paperwork, but had also begun distancing himself from her weeks before the show. According to one assistant, Electra had confronted him, accusing him of betrayal and threatening to expose a secret involving financial mismanagement within Forrester Creations' legal department. If true, it meant Carter had both motive and opportunity. Yet, what kept gnawing at Detective Ortega, the lead investigator, was the perfection of the crime. There were no defensive wounds on Electra's hands. No sign of struggle. Whoever approached her, she had trusted. And whoever killed her, she had allowed close enough to lower her guard. That realization narrowed the field. The murder wasn't about rivalry alone, it was about intimacy and betrayal. Meanwhile, within Forrester Creations, paranoia spread like wildfire. Designers eyed one another with suspicion, alliances shifted, and the elegant walls of the atelier began to feel like the set of a psychological thriller. Paris grew increasingly anxious. She confided to Hope that she had received anonymous messages warning her to stay quiet about the gloves. Someone was watching, ensuring no one uncovered the truth too quickly. Hope urged her to go to the police, but Paris hesitated. The memory of the white gloves haunted her, the way they had glistened under the emergency exit light. In her heart, she wasn't certain she had seen RJ at all. The figure had moved differently, slower, older. Late one evening, when everyone else had gone home, Carter returned to the atelier. He stood where Electra's blood had stained the marble floor, tracing the outline of the crime scene with his gaze. Guilt consumed him. Not because he had killed her, but because he had given her the weapon that ended her life. He replayed every memory, every argument, every stolen glance. He had loved her once, silently, and now that silence had become unbearable. He knew she had been afraid in her final weeks. She had mentioned someone following her, someone she thought she recognized from her past. He dismissed it as stress. Now it was the only lead that made sense. The next morning, Carter confessed to the police that his shears had indeed been stolen, but not recently. He had discovered their absence a week before Electra's death and assumed she had misplaced them. That detail changed everything. The killer hadn't acted in the heat of the moment. The weapon had been planted long before the event, hidden in plain sight. It meant the murder had been premeditated, part of a larger plan designed to unfold at the height of Electra's success. Detective Ortega revisited the missing footage. With the help of digital forensics, they recovered fragments, frames corrupted but not erased. What they saw sent chills down everyone's spine. The shadow entering the atelier didn't match RJ's height. It was taller, broader, and moved with a deliberate, confident gait. And on the figure's wrist was something faintly reflective, a gold bracelet engraved with a tiny emblem. When the image was enhanced, the emblem became visible, the Forrester F, custom-made for senior staff. Only a handful of employees had them, and one of them was Carter. When confronted, Carter didn't deny being there that night. He admitted going to see Electra after the show, to congratulate her, to clear the air about their strained relationship. He claimed she was alive when he left, working on a final adjustment to one of the gowns. He had taken off his bracelet to avoid catching the fabric and must have forgotten it on the table. The police found it near her workstation, confirming his story but not his innocence. If anything, it deepened the mystery. As the days passed, the investigation grew darker. Hidden rivalries and secret affairs surfaced, each more explosive than the last. Hope discovered that Electra had been preparing to leave Forrester Creations to start her own label, funded by an anonymous investor. One traced back to a foreign fashion conglomerate that had long wanted to acquire Forrester's intellectual property. That revelation reframed the murder entirely. This wasn't just about personal vengeance, it was corporate warfare disguised as tragedy. Someone had killed Electra not out of passion, but to silence her. When Carter returned home one night, exhausted and haunted, he found an envelope waiting on his doorstep. Inside was a single object, his original pair of shears, polished and gleaming, the initials CW freshly re-engraved. Beneath it lay a note in neat, elegant handwriting, "Nothing cuts deeper than love." At that moment, Carter understood what no one else did. The killer wasn't finished. The crime had been more than murder, it was a message. Electra's death was only the first act in a much larger design, one that had been unfolding for months, maybe years. And the person orchestrating it knew them all intimately, knew how to make them doubt, accuse, and destroy one another. The weapon wasn't the shears. It was the fear now slicing through every member of Forrester Creations. As dawn broke over Los Angeles once again, the city glittered with the illusion of perfection. But inside the house of Forrester, beauty had turned to suspicion, love to poison, and every shadow looked like a silhouette with a pair of white gloves. The truth was coming, slow and silent, stitched together one thread at a time, and when it finally revealed itself, it would unravel not only the mystery of Electra's death, but the very fabric of the family itself. The night of the Forrester runway show began with applause that could have swallowed the city. The chandeliers above shimmered like captured constellations, and the air vibrated with champagne laughter, silk, and perfume. Every camera lens was fixed on the stage, every heart suspended on the promise of spectacle. At the center of it all was Electra Forrester, the prodigy who had risen faster than any designer in the house's history, a woman who wore ambition like a crown. As the lights dimmed and the final gown was unveiled, she stepped forward with poise and radiance, her creation gliding like liquid gold beneath the spotlight. But then, in the space between applause and silence, she faltered. The heel of her stiletto wavered, her hand trembled against the skirt of the gown, and her body collapsed, lifeless, across the shining runway. For a long moment no one moved. The audience thought it was part of the act, an avant-garde ending, perhaps a dramatic statement about fragility and fame. But when Steffi Forrester rushed forward and saw the color drain from Electra's face, horror replaced confusion. Cameras were silenced, laughter strangled in throats. The music stopped abruptly, leaving only the echo of her fall. The youngest Forrester heir lay motionless, her body still draped in the show's signature dress, the very garment meant to represent triumph. Within seconds, the runway that had symbolized legacy became the scene of catastrophe. Backstage, chaos erupted. Paramedics fought to revive her as designers screamed orders, security cordoned off the area, and reporters flooded social media with live updates. But what haunted everyone most wasn't just the tragedy, it was the speed. One moment, she was radiant, the next gone. Steffi, trembling, noticed something no one else did at first, the faint glimmer of metal embedded beneath the hemline. When the paramedics lifted the fabric, they found it, an industrial sewing needle coated with a transparent residue. It had pierced Electra's thigh, leaving barely a mark, but enough to inject something fatal. The dress, it seemed, had been turned into a weapon. As whispers rippled through the stunned crowd, Steffi's instincts flared. Only one name rose in her mind: Sheila Carter. The history between them was soaked in blood and betrayal. Sheila's obsession with destruction, her flair for chaos, her ability to infiltrate the most secure environments, it all fit too perfectly. Steffi's voice shook as she confronted the others. Sheila did this. The accusation hung in the air, heavy and electric. No one dared agree, but no one dismissed it either. Deacon Sharp, standing near the production monitors, immediately denied any involvement. His face turned pale, his hands trembling as he swore he hadn't seen Sheila in weeks. But when Rich demanded proof, a detail emerged that couldn't be ignored. Deacon's name appeared on a recent receipt for a set of medical-grade needles purchased just days before the show. The discovery was damning. The police were called. The glamour of the evening dissolved into a circus of suspicion and grief. Deacon insisted it was a coincidence, that the needles were for repairs at Il Giardino, not for sabotage, but even his old allies doubted him. In Beverly Hills, coincidence was a word reserved for the guilty. As the forensic team began examining the dress, Brooke Logan's keen eye caught something others missed. The gown Electra had worn wasn't placed where it should have been. On the lineup board backstage, the signature dress had originally been assigned to another model, Hope's assistant, a young woman responsible for organizing the wardrobe sequence. Brooke's mind raced. She knew Hope's designs had recently been under scrutiny. Whispers of a Forrester sabotage campaign had been circulating for weeks. Could someone have swapped the dress intentionally, aiming to humiliate Hope's division, only for Electra to unknowingly take the fall? The assistant was brought in for questioning. She was shaking, incoherent, overwhelmed by guilt but not confession. Under pressure, she admitted to switching the order of the dresses moments before the show. Hope had been scheduled to close the event wearing the signature piece, but Electra had demanded to end the night herself. She said it was her right, the assistant whispered. She wanted the spotlight. That last-minute change sealed her fate. The poison wasn't meant for her, it was meant for Hope. The revelation cracked the case wide open. What had seemed like a personal attack on Electra was, in truth, a calculated strike against Hope's brand. Someone had planted the poison needle in the lining of the gown, timing it perfectly to coincide with Hope's appearance, ensuring that she would collapse on stage, discrediting both her and her mother's line in front of the entire fashion world. But Electra's vanity, her impulsive decision to switch dresses without authorization, had turned her into the unintended victim. The room fell into a stunned silence as the implications sank in. Hope, pale and shaking, covered her mouth in disbelief. The gown had been meant for her. The death that had shocked the fashion world was never part of fate. It was an accident of ego, timing, and cruelty. Steffi's anger, once directed squarely at Sheila, began to waver. If this had been an attack on Hope, then perhaps Sheila wasn't the mastermind. But who was? Deacon's alibi crumbled further when detectives found traces of the same residue on one of his restaurant's storage shelves. He swore he had been framed. His love for Sheila, he claimed, had made him reckless, not murderous. But his denials meant little in a world where betrayal was currency. Steffi still suspected that Sheila had found a way to use him, manipulating him into purchasing the supplies without realizing their purpose. The thought chilled her. Sheila didn't need to be present to orchestrate death. Her influence lingered like poison in the air. Meanwhile, Brooke couldn't shake the feeling that someone closer to home had engineered the disaster. She remembered Hope's assistant's nervous glances in the days before the show, the whispered phone calls, the anxiety. It was too deliberate. The assistant had the opportunity, the access, and the knowledge of which garments would be worn and when. But what she lacked was motive. Who would gain from Hope's downfall? Then Brooke thought of Poppy, a rival executive from a competing fashion house, who had been seen visiting Forrester Creations weeks earlier, pretending to negotiate a collaboration. It wouldn't be the first time corporate espionage had found its way into couture. As the investigation deepened, Toxicology reports confirmed that the needle's coating contained a potent neurotoxin used in veterinary anesthesia, undetectable at low doses, lethal in seconds when injected into the bloodstream. It was rare, difficult to obtain, and traceable only to specialized suppliers. The purchase trail led to a clinic registered under a shell company based in Genoa City. The same city, Ridge grimly noted, where Sheila Carter had once disappeared for months after her supposed reform. But the greatest twist came not from the police, but from Ridge himself. Reviewing security footage from the dressing area, he spotted Electra alone minutes before showtime, examining the dresses. She had been restless, pacing, muttering about, deserving the spotlight. Then, in one impulsive motion, she unzipped her assigned gown and replaced it with a signature piece hanging nearby. The camera caught her smirking at her reflection, unaware that she was sealing her own fate. That decision, so small, so vain, was the fatal act that no one could have predicted. The news broke across fashion networks within hours. Electra Forrester dies wearing dress meant for Hope Logan. The headlines painted tragedy as irony, turning her final moment into a lesson about pride, competition, and destiny. Yet for those who knew her, it was unbearable. Hope wept not only for the woman who had died, but for the guilt that came with knowing that she, not Electra, was supposed to wear that gown. Brooke tried to console her, reminding her that the true blame lay with the person who had planted the toxin. But even she knew that truth in this world was slippery. What mattered wasn't who intended to kill, but who paid the price. As the police worked to identify the real culprit, Deacon found himself cornered by his own past. Every connection to Sheila made him a suspect. His love for her had always been a dangerous gamble. When he visited her cell after her latest arrest, he begged her to tell him the truth. Sheila only smiled. "You think I'd waste something so artistic on Hope?" she whispered. "I would never give that woman a stage." Her denial, dripping with disdain, was chilling precisely because it might have been true. For all her evil, Sheila's crimes were personal, never corporate. But then, who else would know enough about toxins, about needles, about timing and misdirection? In the weeks that followed, Forrester Creations transformed from a fashion empire into a fortress of paranoia. Staff were interrogated, designs locked away, friendships eroded under suspicion. Steffi became a leader forged by tragedy, determined to restore her family's honor while privately drowning in guilt for blaming the wrong person. Hope buried herself in work, her every sketch now haunted by the ghost of Electra's fall. Ridge, hardened by years of scandal, warned everyone that this was not just about murder, it was about message. Someone had wanted to remind them all that beauty could be deadly, that every stitch could hide a secret. When the final police report arrived, its conclusion was both clear and cruel. The poison dress had been planted as part of a sabotage plot targeting Hope's line, orchestrated by unknown corporate interests. The intended victim had never been Electra. Her death was an accident, a collision between vanity and vengeance. There would be no justice, only consequences. The case was closed, but the story refused to die. In the months after, the runway remained empty. The gown, sealed in evidence storage, became a symbol whispered about across the industry. Some said it was cursed. Others called it poetic justice. But to those who had loved Electra, it was simply unbearable, a reminder that in the pursuit of fame and perfection, even the smallest choice could end a life. Steffi often returned to that night in her dreams, the applause, the brilliance, the sudden silence. She would wake up hearing the thud of Electra's body hitting the stage, the gasp of the crowd, the glint of the poisoned needle. In those moments, she understood something she never had before, that in their world of glamour and ambition, death did not always come with malice. Sometimes, it came dressed in silk, hidden behind beauty, born not from hate but from pride. And that, perhaps, was the cruelest design of all.